Over the course of the last century, there have been hundreds of movies that were very successful and had large profits. However, there have also been many movies that many people don't talk about that have lost a lot of money at the box office. I'm gonna go through the movies that have lost the most money and try to break down the reasons for their financial despair. First, I'm gonna go over what makes a movie a financial success. A lot of people think for a movie to make money, all it needs to do is make back its production budget, though this is not the case. Just to break even, a movie needs to make about 2.5 to 3 times the production budget. This is all due to a separate marketing budget and theaters taking a percentage of ticket sales. So if a movie has a budget of, let's say, $200 million, it would have a separate marketing budget of like 80 million to 120 million. And then on top of that, theaters would take a percentage, around 50% of the ticket sales, making a $200 million movie have to make around $600 million just to make its money back. With that out of the way, let's begin with our first movie. Our first movie is going to be John Carter, which sits at about a $260 million budget and has made a total of $280 million worldwide. With a $260 million budget, John Carter would have had to make about $780 million just to break even. So if we subtract those, we get about $520 million. Now, if we divide that by 2, since theaters would have had to take about half that anyways, we can suggest that John Carter lost a total of about $260 million. There's pretty much one sole reason of why this movie did so bad at the box office, and you might be able to guess why. It's the simple fact that the budget was just way too high. Whenever you're making an original movie, I know this movie wasn't technically original since it was adapted by a book, but we're gonna say it was an original movie. When you're making an original movie, you never give that movie a $260 million budget. I'm pretty sure Disney gave this such a large budget is because they were trying to like start a new really popular franchise. Like they were trying to get another Pirates of the Caribbean, basically, just so they could get like free money for the next 30 years. But still, you don't start the first movie at a $260 million budget. Pirates of the Caribbean started at like a $150 million budget and then made its way up to $380 million. You don't start a budget at 260, not that high. Also, Taylor Kitsch or whatever his name wasn't really that popular at the time. He's much more popular now, like due to some of his bigger movies that happened in like 2012. But he wasn't really popular at the time, which is kind of dumb by Disney, because you kind of want like a big actor if you want to start off a franchise. I know it doesn't always work having a big actor, but it just helps to have a big actor. Also, they needed bigger names in this movie besides him. I know like Willem Dafoe and Bryan Cranston were in it, but I have like a super popular person play like a villain, at least in the first movie, just to get it rolling. And also the director, he wasn't an unknown director, but his entire like filmography was just animated movies, like Finding Nemo and stuff, and that's hard to take into live action. I bet like they probably if they had a more experienced director, they might be able to sell it a little bit better and it might just do better overall. Now, those were definitely the main reasons of why John Carter failed. It kind of sucks that it failed. It would have been pretty cool if it turned into a franchise. I mean, the movie kind of sucked, but I guess it would have been pretty cool to see. But I guess it's for the best that it didn't. Next up on my list, we got any movie that came out between March 2020 and like near the end of 2021, besides Spider-Man No Way Home and Nobody. Other than that, every other movie failed. It's pretty obvious to guess why. No one was going to the theaters during those times. Theaters were just shut down, and studios were barely releasing movies, and the one that they did, they just all failed. Next up, we got Strange World, which is definitely the most recent movie on this list, coming out about last November. This had about a $170 million budget, needing it to make about $510 million. If we subtract those, we get about $340 million, and then divide that by 2, means that this movie lost a grand total of about $170 million. I'm not really sure why this movie completely failed. It had a decent cast and a decent director that kind of carried it. The animation was good. The movie itself was like okay. I think like Disney just sort of abandoned this project. Not really sure why. Like I never saw a lot of marketing for it, and it wasn't really that wide of a release. And internationally, it didn't really do so good. So I think overall Disney just like sort of just gave up on the project. Next up, we got Battleship 2012, which had about a $200 million budget, made about $300 million. which means that it would have had to make about 600 million. You subtract that by the 300 million dollars you make, you get 300 million obviously. Divide that by 2 gives a total of about 150 million dollars was lost in the process of releasing this movie. I'm just gonna blame this movie on a Taylor Keach guy. Man, like this poor guy. Same year, he starred in 2 movies that completely flopped. That is so sad. I feel bad for him. No wonder his career was like ruined after. It wasn't like ruined, but he never got anything else that was that big. Anyways, I don't know why this didn't flop. Maybe it was just Taylor Keach. Though, so I'm just gonna read from Google here. It's saying that it couldn't attract younger audiences. They need some help from like 30-year-old men there, but whatever. Sorry, I got off topic there. It said 2/3 of the film's opening night crowd was over the age of 25. It also proved more enticing to males. I guess that makes sense. Movies need younger people to like them because younger people are the ones who are going to the movies. Like, quite a lot of them are. They're not the ones with money, but they love going to the theater. Like, I love going to the theater with my friends or by myself. Yeah. Okay. So I guess that was just its marketing mistake, I guess. Also, the movie itself just was not that good. So next up, we have 2 movies. I'm gonna say Devotion and the Whitney Houston movie. So Whitney Houston movie is now the most recent one, actually. Both of these failed for the same reason. It's just that Sony just did not care about these projects for some reason. They were both pretty good movies, and I don't know why. Like, Devotion did not do good internationally. Maybe just Sony just didn't really care. I just don't really get why, though, you know? Just wasn't marketed enough. Marketing was good, didn't appeal to the right audiences. The actors were for Devotion. Like, there's some pretty decently big actors, like Mr. Glenn Powell coming off of Top Gun Maverick, and Jonathan Majors, who was pretty popular. He had the Kang hype before he got arrested, but this was way before that. Whitney Houston, like Whitney Houston's a pretty big name. I don't know why the movie did do better, but I guess the marketing just failed. Our final one for today is going to be Jupiter Ascending. Now, this failed for like the same reason as like John Carter. It was just its budget was too high. It had like a 150 $200 million budget and only made about $200 million. So right there, it's losing what had to make 600, subtract 200, 400, divide that by 2, 200. Yeah, so it lost about 200 million against a $200 million budget. So just failed. Also, I haven't actually seen this movie, but I heard it was like a bit of a horror movie. Now, the only ever like successful high budget movie was I Am a Legend. Like all other horror movies are lower budget. There might have been a few like higher budget ones that I'm just not thinking of. But you can only make horror movies like lower budget because they only appeal to like very certain audiences. But like Channing Tatum was a pretty big name, but maybe not like as much at the time, I guess. But it was most likely just because its budget was too high for like a new movie. Like and subscribe for a part 2.